So even those of you who have not been paying attention cannot have missed the fact that it is Holiday Club starting tomorrow. And during Holiday Club, we are going to be looking at some of the stories from the life of Peter that happened after the resurrection. And so we're going to start tomorrow with the Ascension, and then Tuesday is going to be the Pentecost. So those 2 days will be a little bit tricky. But then we're going to be looking at the healing of the man who couldn't walk, the story of Tabitha, and the story of Cornelius. And Peter was right at the heart of those stories. He was also very much at the heart of this rapidly growing new movement that was called the church. People were hearing about Jesus, they were experiencing some amazing things, and they were choosing to live their lives as if Jesus was king. It started off in Jerusalem, but very rapidly it spread out over all parts of the known world. And so in Jerusalem and then elsewhere, there were groups of these people who were committed to following Jesus, who would meet together in homes, they would eat together, they would pray together. And as they did that, more and more people were joining, and so the movement was growing and growing. And so as I say, Peter was very much at the heart of that, and we're going to be looking at some of these stories in Holiday Club. So I thought today we would go back to the beginning, and we've just read from Luke's Gospel the account of Jesus calling Peter. Next week, on Sunday, we're going to look at a story after the stories that we're looking at in Holiday Club, where Peter has a miraculous escape from prison from Acts chapter 12. I know that some of you will have watched The Chosen. Anyone watched The Chosen at all? Okay, a couple of you. I thought there might be a few more than that. The Chosen is, for those of you that don't know, it is a television series dramatizing the whole of the gospel story, so the life of Jesus. You can find it on their app, and so you can watch it directly from an app. You can watch it from their website. You'll find it on YouTube. And if you've got an Amazon Fire Stick, you will find it on there as well. So far, they've done 3 series. They're currently doing series 4. And I follow them on social media, and there was a bit of concern about these strikes that are going on. But apparently, they've got an exemption, so they're able to continue filming tomorrow with series 4. And I think there's going to be 7 series altogether, which will cover the whole of the gospel story. Now, obviously, there is a lot in that is made up, because there are lots and lots of gaps in the gospel story that we simply don't know exactly what happened. But they've made some intelligent and inspirational choices and how they're going to fill some of those gaps. And as long as you remember that, it is a really good series, and I would recommend it. One of the things that it's helpful for is a reminder that the gospel stories didn't happen in a vacuum. They happen in a context, and every encounter that we read about in the Gospels has a backstory. Now, we very rarely know what that backstory is, and obviously we can't be sure of what those backstories were, but the writers of The Chosen have made some attempts to fill in some of those backstories. And so when it comes to the calling of the first disciples, sometimes I think we imagine that Jesus was just walking along a beach and picked some random fishing boats, and these guys who had never heard of Jesus before, through some amazing work of the Holy Spirit in their lives, decided that they were going to abandon everything and follow this random person who they had no idea who he was. Now, obviously, in the Gospels, there was no social media, there was no 24-hour news on the telly, but news did travel. People did hear about things. And the people at that time, they had been waiting for the Messiah for hundreds of years. And throughout that time, there had been a series of false dawns that were convincing enough that people were prepared to follow these people that said that they were the Messiah, they were prepared to fight, they were prepared to die as they encountered the occupying oppressive forces. And so there is now on the scene rumours of another Messiah, and people will be hoping maybe this time this is the one. Jesus had been performing miracles, he'd been teaching with authority, and so people were asking the question, could Jesus of Nazareth be the Messiah? Could he be the real deal? These events also took place in a climate in which it was, within Israel, certainly it was well known that you would have teachers or rabbis who would call to themselves a group of disciples, and they would then learn from their rabbi, and they might well travel around, spend time in the wilderness. And John the Baptist is an example of that. So John had his own disciples. And so being called to be a disciple, being called to follow a rabbi, wasn't as strange then as it might appear to us now. And Peter would have heard about Jesus before Jesus called him to be a disciple. In fact, from Luke's gospel, we know that Peter had met Jesus. There was an encounter which we read about in Luke chapter 4. Jesus had been teaching in Peter's local synagogue. Whether or not Peter was there, we have no idea. But the people that were there were amazed at Jesus' teaching. He taught with someone who had authority. And then he'd healed someone who'd had an evil spirit, and news spread throughout the region. As quickly as people could walk or run, news spread. And for some reason, we don't know what it was, Jesus decided that he was going to go back to Peter's house. And whilst he was there, he healed Peter's mother-in-law from a high fever. And so news that Jesus was there, that Jesus was able to heal people, spread. And so people started coming to Peter's house to be healed. And Jesus healed them during the day, and then the next day he decided that he needed to leave and go somewhere else because there were other villages that needed to hear the good news as well. And so Peter would have been there in his own house watching as Jesus healed all kinds of people. Then Jesus left, but no doubt they continued to talk. No doubt the rumors continued to spread. Could this be the Messiah? And then sometime later we read that Peter is finished an unsuccessful night of fishing. He's on the beach washing his nets, and Jesus turns up, gets into his boat, asks Peter to push out into deeper water and throw his nets over the side and catch some fish. Peter knew enough about Jesus to know to do what Jesus said. He'd already seen enough to know that if Jesus says, throw your nets, yes, he might make a comment, well, we've been doing that all night with no joy, but he knows enough to do what Jesus says. And then there is this miraculous catch of fish that we read about in Luke chapter 5. And Peter is clear in his head who Jesus is. And so he falls at Jesus' knees and he says, "Away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." But rather than go away, Jesus says to Peter, "Don't be afraid. Come and follow me." Jesus gives him a new task to go and fish for people, and we read that Peter leaves everything and follows Jesus. And the rest, as they say, is history. And we're going to be looking at a part of that history in the coming week and then again next Sunday. So it is Holiday Club this week. Then it is August. And so there are going to be no more home group questions until September. There are going to be no weekly email reflections until September. And we all know, in fact, we were having a conversation about this outside before, we all know that we learn best when we're discussing things with people. One of the least effective ways for you to learn is to sit there listening to me. And this is one of the reasons why home groups are such an important part of our church life. And if you're not part of a home group and you'd like to be, then do talk to me afterwards. We also know that in the week before Holiday Club, it is unlikely that I have had very much time to prepare my sermon. And so you are going to have to do the work this morning. And we're going to start with a simple question. We're going to do it on Slido. So if you have a mobile phone, a smartphone, go onto the internet, go to slido.com and type in that code there, 1584339. And if you're watching online and you're watching live, it is currently 11:28 on Sunday morning. So as long as you're watching live, then you can join in too, and we will get your results. I think I've set it up so that the results will be anonymous. So you can write whatever you like, and I don't think I will know that it's you that said it. Let me just put this in. I can see, make sure everything's working. If you've not got a phone with you, don't worry, because we're going to discuss it with the person next to you, and they can type in your answers. So when you've got to Slido and you typed in that number, at the top it says Q&A or polls. If you go to polls, nothing should be there yet because I haven't launched it. I will launch it in just a second when I find out where on earth in my notes I am. Oh, yes, there. Turn the page. That's it. Right. So we've already talked about a little bit about Peter. We've mentioned that within his cultural context, there were rabbis who would call disciples to follow them. But the first question I have is, was Peter a good choice for a disciple? Do you think that Peter was a good choice? So you can talk to the person next to you. I'm going to give you it's only a yes-no answer. When you've come to some conclusion about that, if you've both got your phones or one of you's got a phone, you've got a yes-no option. There is no maybe. I'm going to force you into a yes and no. I know you are hopeless at doing what you are told, but you do not have any other option. And you have to be able to defend your answer. Right, still a few answers coming in. I'm sure that there will be others. But as things stand at the moment, 82% of you said yes, and 83% of you said yes, and 17% said no. Does anybody feel brave enough to be able to tell me what answer they gave and to defend that answer? I'm going to give you the microphone just so that people online will be able to hear as well.
So I was one of the people who said no, because I think on the face of it, Peter didn't look like a very good deal. He was a bit of a rough diamond, a little bit out there, probably mixed with some dubious characters. And yeah, I think probably if you'd seen his CV, you wouldn't have chosen him.
Okay, great. So if Jesus had seen Peter's CV, he probably wouldn't have chosen him. Anyone want to give a different view? Steve. Mandy, if I come to you, am I going to get a sermon or a short answer? All right, brilliant. I'll come to you in a second. Steve.
Well, I said yes because if Jesus thought he wasn't a good choice, he wouldn't have chosen him.
Okay, so you've said yes because Jesus chose him, and therefore he must have been a good choice.
I was going to say yes because Jesus picked him, but I'll give another. He did what Jesus said.
Okay, so he did what Jesus said. Jesus chose him. Anyone else want to give either? Karen?
So I said yes because he was enthusiastic, and you need enthusiastic followers.
Okay, he was enthusiastic, and you need enthusiastic followers. One more or no? Right, there will be other opportunities for you to get involved. And so Peter was certainly an unlikely candidate. I think it's probably safe to say that most people wouldn't have chosen Peter for the reasons that Sharon gave. He was a bit of a rough diamond. He almost certainly mixed with the wrong crowd. He probably couldn't read, probably couldn't write, probably had minimal education apart from how to fish, and it seems as though he wasn't particularly good at that either. But Jesus did choose him. And I think we see in the way that Peter responded to Jesus. He knew that he was a sinful man, and he knew that he didn't deserve to be called by Jesus, even though Jesus did call him. Okay, so another question, and this you have an opportunity to type this time. And again, I think it's set up so that it's all anonymous. So this question, and for those of you that aren't on a phone, this is the question so you can discuss it with the people next to you. So Peter chose to follow Jesus, but many people didn't. Why do you think people choose not to follow Jesus? And so you can type an answer to that. I think you might even better see what other people are typing, and if you agree with what they've said, click on it and it will boost their answer. Possibly. I might be wrong. I'm still not quite sure. So just make sure you're on the polls setting, not the Q&A setting. So if you've not got a phone, or even if you have got a phone, you can talk to the people next to you and around you. And then when some of those answers have come in. Right, okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 answers so far. I'll just give you another 30 seconds to type. So some of the answers that we've got, although there are 9 participants still typing, I'm told. So I'm going to start reading a line and it's suddenly going to drop off the bottom of my screen as another 9 answers pile in. We have got some answers such as people don't want to be different, following Jesus can be hard, too difficult, people who they don't want to change, a lack of information about who Jesus is, they don't believe the account of Jesus in the Bible is true, following him is too difficult, they don't believe who he is, where did that one go? Just look. They don't think that following Jesus could change the reality. They're happy with their lives as they are, and they want to carry on what they're doing. Too busy. Don't see why they need to. Oh, crumbs, no wonder this person took a long time. Someone has just... Oh, it may well be. Someone has just posted practically an essay. Was that you? And ChatGPT? No. Putting self-interest to one side. They don't want someone telling them what to do. Coming out of their comfort zone. The reasons why some people choose not to follow Jesus are diverse and complex. This is definitely a ChatGPT answer, I think, from somebody. I'll have a look at it later. It's too long for me to read at the moment. So those are some of the reasons why people might choose not to follow Jesus. We have one more question. You'll be pleased to know that if you've got the free version of Slido, which is what I use, you're only allowed 3 poll questions. I didn't know that until I tried to type the 4th question, and it told me, no, you're only allowed 3 questions. So this is the last question. So we read that Peter left his nets, he left his boat, and he went to follow Jesus. But what sort of things might people today need to leave behind if they are going to follow Jesus? Okay, so we have got some answers coming in. So people are saying people might have to leave behind a particular job or their job. They might have to leave behind friends, a particular lifestyle, selfishness, popularity with their current peer group, You might have to leave a job, you might have to leave a country, you may have to leave a way of life and security. I mentioned last week that a few of us had gone a few weeks ago to listen to Bethan and Gareth talk about their work in Chad, and certainly they had to leave a lot of these things behind, including security. Family, work, friends, prejudice, lifestyle, attitudes to work, pride, pursuit of wealth, material possessions. So lots of things coming in. And ChatGPT is on the case again, I think. So lots of things there that we might have to leave behind. So just drawing all of those thoughts together as we're going to be looking at the life of Peter in the coming week at Holiday Club. So Peter was certainly an unlikely candidate. He would probably have not been chosen by most people as an ideal disciple. And interestingly, there's a similar story to this at the after the resurrection, and we looked at this a few weeks ago, where Peter did let Jesus down, but Jesus gives him another opportunity and reinstates him on a beach after a miraculous catch of fish. A very similar story to the one that we have read here, and I'm sure the two are deliberately tied together. Peter, as we'll see in the coming week and next Sunday, was able to do amazing things, although rather God was able to do amazing things through Peter and through the other disciples. It wasn't about them. It was about the person that they were following, and we might disqualify ourselves from being disciples or think that there's nothing special about us, and therefore we can't possibly be disciples. Jesus wouldn't be interested in calling us, but I think when we read the gospel stories, we see that as long as we are prepared to come and acknowledge that we are sinful people, then we are exactly the sort of people that Jesus wants to call, and the sorts of people that God wants to use through the power of the Holy Spirit. We're not going to be looking at the story from Acts chapter 4. This is what happens after the story of the healing of the man who couldn't walk. But Peter and John are before some of the religious authorities. And we read in Acts chapter 4, verse 13, that when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. The being with Jesus made all the difference. Being with Jesus had transformed Peter's life, and so that he was the sort of person that God could use in the way that he then did in the setting up and the establishment of the early church. I expect we've all got different plans for the summer. For some of us, it will be a chance to take some holiday and a break from work, a chance to slow down a bit. For others, maybe you've already taken your holiday, and so the next few weeks are going to be pretty normal, except your journey to work will be about 10 times quicker because there's no school traffic. Some of you are retired, and so the coming few weeks are going to be exactly the same as the previous few weeks. The only difference is that all those things that normally punctuate your week, so you know it's Monday or you know it's Wednesday, are not going to be there, with the exception of Community Hub on a Wednesday and Community Hub on a Monday, the picnics on the rec on a Wednesday. So if you want some pointers in your week so you have got some idea about what day it is other than Sunday, then there are a few things that are carrying on. But we'll have different plans for the summer. For some of us, it'll be exactly the same. For some of us, it'll be quite different, and we'll have a little bit more time on our hands. But over these next few weeks, I would encourage us to spend time with Jesus, because spending time with Jesus makes all the difference. Spending time with Jesus can transform our lives. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's something you've never done before, it's not something you're used to doing, then I have on the table at the back, I printed out a sheet of some ideas on how to spend time with Jesus this summer. I've only printed 10, But if you get to the table and find there aren't any, just have a word with me, and I can quite easily print off some more. A few ideas on, particularly if this is not something you've done before, you've got no idea how to go about it, then there's some ideas on there about how to pray. There's some ideas on there about how to start reading the Bible. And we might want to just use some of the time over the summer to spend a little bit more time with Jesus and see what difference it makes. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to hand back to Karen.